Would you please be upstanding for the arrival of Her Excellency, the Honourable Linda Dessau, Governor of Victoria, Mr. Anthony Howard, and the Premier of Victoria.
Please be seated. I would like to invite Auntie Joy Murphy-Wandon to the lectern for the Welcome to Country.
Ceremonies are regal and customary. My people, my father's people, ceremoniously gathered here on many occasions for many years. My father, James Henry Wandon, served in World War I for our people and our country. Our family are honoured wearing his medals on Anzac Day. I respectfully acknowledge my father and thank him for the opportunities I have in my life today. I acknowledge our ancestors, elders, and communities across this nation and neighbouring islands. I also acknowledge the Honourable Linda Dessau, Governor of Victoria, Mr. Anthony Howard, Premier Andrews, and all the very important people that are here today. Today is an occasion of exception. I acknowledge the passing of Her Royal Highness Queen Victoria II and send my love and healing to her family, who I know she loved dearly. I had the honour of welcoming Queen Elizabeth on a number of occasions, and one in particular, or a few particular times, conversations that we had, I'd just like to share with you. I was with my brother, who was the Narangita at the time, and we met the Queen at the airport. Or I think it was the airport, and former Premier Steve Bracks is with us today, so he might correct me because my memory's not all that good. However, the Queen loved her horses, and especially racing, and so did my brother. And he said to me, I'm going to ask her, does she know of the scratchings today? I said, oh, whatever. And he did, as he was greeting her, and she said, I'm sorry, don't know I have any today. The other occasion was at a beautiful gathering at the National Gallery of Victoria, the Ian Potter Centre, and a school of children had built this beautiful bundles, the eagle's nest, and it was an act of reconciliation. And I asked that the Queen and Prince Philip would please have a branch, put their note of reconciliation, and then put it in to the bundles nest. Prince Philip said, no, that's not my place to do that while the Queen's here. I said, well, that's okay. So the Queen put whatever on there, and then she turned around to Prince Philip as if to say, what do I do with this branch? And he said, well, put it back where it belongs. She had a bit of a smile on her face, I can say. And there are many times, but you know, one of the things that I really appreciated was not only meeting her, but sharing with her little talks about our family, and that's why I know her family are truly going to miss her. The Queen said she has made it, and I'm quoting this, always made it clear that the future of the monarchy in Australia is an issue for Australian people and them alone to decide by democratic and constitutional means. Today is a change, a great change in our lives, and I'm so glad that I'm here to be here with this change, and I do hope that there's a change for our people that will give us back self-determination and self-management. Also, I just wanted to acknowledge the passing of Prince Philip and again say it was an honour, as it has been, to welcome all of the royal family, as is our custom of welcoming people to country. Each and every time I have the pleasure of welcoming people to country, I'm reminded of how the times were for my father and his family. But then I'm reminded of this occasion where we're now invited to share with you and speak, and that for me is something that I will always be grateful for. So the gift from us for this gum leaf is about sharing what we've been given. And so I offer this to each and every one of you, to you, your culture and heritage, and say, not only are you welcome to the tops, from the tops of the trees to the roots of the earth, but I thank you. I thank you for joining with me to honour the spirits of my ancestors. May we walk each day, and of course now in the future with, I've forgotten how to already say King Charles, but for the moment that will do. May we always walk together in friendship and in kindness. And my language is the Woi Wurrung, Womenjakar, Wurundjeri Balak, Yemen, Kundibek, and you are most welcome to the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. Thank you.
Thank you, Auntie Joy. Executive councillors, distinguished guests, thank you for your attendance on this solemn and historic day. This morning's proclamation ceremony will be conducted in 3 parts. Part 1, the attestation and reading of the official proclamation. The proclamation is a joint proclamation advising of the demise of the Crown in Victoria with the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II and the accession of His Majesty King Charles III, to proclaim that sovereignty in Victoria has passed. Part 2 will address the impact of the demise on the operation of Section 6A of the Constitution, which requires that there be in Victoria a Lieutenant Governor and an Administrator who are able to deputise for the Governor when required. New oaths or affirmations of office as Administrator and allegiance to the new Sovereign will be made by the Lieutenant Governor and Administrator. Part 3 will address matters arising from the demise for Parliament. The effect of Section 23(2) of the Constitution prevents members of both houses from permission to sit or vote following the notification of the demise. Her Excellency will appoint commissioners, authorising them to administer oaths and affirmations of allegiance to members of the Assembly and the Council to enable them to sit as members and perform their duties of the Legislature. We now commence Part 1. Following a meeting of the full Executive Council a short time ago, the Premier has advised the Governor to issue a joint proclamation notifying Victorians of the demise of the Crown and the accession of the King. This recommendation was endorsed by all Executive Councillors. Your Excellency and Premier, I now invite you to take your seats at the signing table. Premier, I now invite you to sign the proclamation and remain seated at the signing table. The Acting Chief Justice will now sign the proclamation. The President of the Legislative Council will now sign the proclamation. The Speaker of the Legislative Assembly will now sign the proclamation. Her Excellency the Governor will now sign the proclamation. Premier, I invite you to return to your seat. Your Excellency, I now invite you to read the proclamation.
We, the undersigned, do hereby proclaim our late Sovereign Queen Elizabeth II, by the grace of God, Queen of Australia and her other realms and territories, head of the Commonwealth, is deceased, and that by the death of our late Sovereign, the Crown has solely and rightfully come to His Royal Highness, Prince Charles Philip Arthur George, Prince of Wales, Knight of the Order of Australia, who is now His Majesty King Charles III, by the grace of God, King of Australia and his other realms and territories, head of the Commonwealth. God save the King.
God save the King. Thank you, Your Excellency. That concludes part 1 of the ceremony. Part 2 will address the appointments of the Lieutenant Governor and the Administrator. The Premier has advised the Governor to administer the oath of allegiance and of office to the Lieutenant Governor, Professor James Alexander Angus, and the affirmations of allegiance and office to the Acting Chief Justice and President of the Court of Appeal, the Honourable Karen Lee Emerton. Your Excellency, I invite you to return to your seat at the signing table. Lieutenant Governor, I invite you to approach the Governor. Acting Chief Justice, I invite you to take the witness to witness the taking of the oaths.
Thank you. Professor Angus, I invite you to take the oath of allegiance and the oath of office as Lieutenant Governor of the State of Victoria.
I, James Alexander Angus, swear by Almighty God that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles III and His Majesty's heirs and successors according to law.
Thank you.
I, James Alexander Angus, swear by Almighty God that I will well and truly serve His Majesty King Charles III and His Majesty's heirs and successors in the office of Lieutenant Governor of the State of Victoria, and will do right to all manner of people after the laws and usages of the state, without fear or favour, affection or ill will.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. I now invite you to sign the oaths in the oath book, and the Acting Chief Justice will then attest your signatures. Thank you. And I'll now ask the Clerk of the Executive Council to sign the oath book too. Thank you.
Lieutenant Governor, you may now return to your seat. Justice Emerton, please remain at the signing table. Your Excellency, I invite you to now swear the Honourable Justice Karen Emerton, Acting Chief Justice and President of the Court of Appeal, to the office of Administrator of the State of Victoria.
Justice Emerton, I invite you to make the affirmation of allegiance and the affirmation of office as Administrator of the State of Victoria.
I, Karen Lee Emerton, do solemnly and sincerely affirm that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty and His Majesty's heirs and successors according to law. I, Karen Lee Emerton, do solemnly and sincerely affirm that I will well and truly serve His Majesty and His Majesty's heirs and successors in the office of Administrator, and do right and to all manner of people after the laws and usages of the state, without fear or favour, affection or ill will.
Thank you. Thank you.
Justice Emerton, I invite you to return to your seat. This concludes part 2 of the ceremony. Your Excellency, I invite you to remain at the signing table. We now commence the third and final part of today's business. I now invite the Premier and the Secretary of the Department of Premier and Cabinet to join the Governor at the signing table. The Governor will now authorise, by way of commissions, Acting Chief Justice, the Honourable Justice Karen Emerton, and Judge of the Court of Appeal, the Honourable Justice Philip Priest, to administer the oath or affirmation of allegiance to members of Parliament tomorrow, Tuesday the 13th of September 2022. The Governor will further authorise the President of the Legislative Council and Speaker of the Legislative Assembly to administer the oath or affirmation of allegiance to any Member of Parliament who has not already taken and subscribed the same since the demise of the Crown. The Premier, the Governor, and the Secretary will now sign commissions to authorise the 4 commissioners to administer the prescribed oaths or affirmations to members in the Parliament Houses. Thank you, Premier. Thank you, Secretary. You may now return to your seats. Your Excellency, I invite you to remain at the signing table. Formal notice of the demise of the Crown must be given to Parliament. As required by Section 23 of our Constitution, the Governor will now sign messages to the Legislative Council and the Legislative Assembly of the Parliament of Victoria to inform them of the demise of the Crown and the accession of the King, and directing honourable members that before they proceed to sit and vote in the Council or the Assembly, severally take and subscribe the oath or affirmation of allegiance set forth in the second schedule to the said Act to His Majesty King Charles III before a commissioner duly authorised by the Governor to attend in the Council or the Assembly. The Governor will now sign the said messages. Your Excellency, that concludes part 3 and the end of formal business. I now invite you to address us.
The Honourable Daniel Andrews, Premier of Victoria, Professor James Angus, Lieutenant Governor of Victoria, the Honourable Justice Karen Emerton, Acting Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Victoria, members of the Victorian Executive Council, the Honourable Nazir Al-Azmar, President of the Legislative Council, the Honourable Marie Edwards, Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, the Right Reverend the Honourable Dr. Peter Hollingworth, former Governor-General of Australia, Professor the Honourable David de Kretzer, former Governor of Victoria, the Honourable Steve Bracks, the Honourable Ted Baillieu and the Honourable Dr Dennis Napthine, former Premiers of Victoria, the Honourable Matthew Guy, Leader of the Opposition, members of the Judiciary, heads of religious communities, members of state and Commonwealth parliaments, permanent heads of state government departments, senior officers of the Australian Defence Force, members of the Consular Corps, and all our distinguished guests and everyone watching from wherever they might be. Can I start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we gather, the Wurundjeri and the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects this morning to their elders past and present, and to elders of other communities who are amongst us. And I thank Auntie Joy for the generous words of welcome to country. We are especially warmed by your presence, Auntie Joy, on a day of such high emotions for us all. Today, on the occasion of this proclamation, we mark the demise of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, who, as we all know, reigned for more than 70 years, being the longest-serving British monarch in history. We reflect on her life of service. We reflect on her relationship with our nation, and in particular with the state of Victoria, and we reflect on the accession of King Charles III and the responsibilities that now fall to him. The widespread feeling of grief upon Her Majesty's passing has been palpable. Although 96 years of age, Her Majesty's strength, energy, commitment, and resilience imbued us with a sense that she could live forever. Of course, that was never to be, but having seen her warm smile last week as she greeted the 15th British Prime Minister of her reign, we were shocked when the sad news arrived so soon thereafter. In these last few days, much has been written about Her Majesty, about her unwavering devotion to duty, her wit and her warmth, her wisdom and kindness, and her grace and her dignity. And of course, her connection with our state of Victoria. Tony and I have been privileged to meet with some of the Victorians who have formed a steady stream as they've lined Government House Drive to sign condolence books or leave floral tributes. They've been old and young, from different backgrounds, from different parts of our city and state, and all with their own different stories. A busload of folks from aged care were amongst the first to arrive. On Saturday, we chatted with 3 generations of an Indian Victorian family. The youngest clutched a bunch of purple flowers, the Queen's favourite colour, she told us very solemnly. Handwritten on the paper wrapped around those flowers was the simple note, "We love our Queen." And the little girl told us that she liked the Queen because she was kind and had a really big job. We met a young man in his 20s in a wheelchair with a mate by his side. He told us he was here because he had nearly met the Queen. He explained that he'd been a patient in the Royal Children's Hospital when Her Majesty opened the new building in 2011, and he'd been thrilled to be one of the patients chosen to meet her. Unfortunately, he was too seriously ill on the day, and the disappointment had stayed with him, and that's why he wanted to be here. We spoke with a uni student. We'd noticed him quietly reading the various notes and messages that people had left. He was overcome with emotion as he explained that his father had been one of the Coldstream Guards who'd served the Queen, and that his grandfather had served her father, King George VI. Being Melbourne, Saturday afternoon saw footy fans too, who detoured, literally, as they told us, to pay their respects on their way to the G. And finally, one woman simply offered her view that the Queen must have felt emotions like all of us, but she just didn't let them get in the way of her duty and service. What a nice perspective. And then there were just all those who had memories of the Queen's visits that they wanted to share. Where they were when they saw her, how old they were, who they were with, and how long they'd waited to catch a glimpse. It's no wonder that so many of us hold memories of Her Majesty's visits. She visited Victoria on 11 occasions. The first, in February 1954, saw Victorians enthusiastically greeting a recently crowned monarch, a young married woman of just 27, and a mother of 2 still very young children. On her last visit in October 2011, we welcomed a monarch and world leader of some 58 years, married by then for almost 65 years, the mother of 4 adult children, grandmother of 8, and by then a great-grandmother too. We remember her, and some met her, in the course of major events and important civic occasions. Her Majesty was the first sovereign, in fact the only sovereign, to open the Victorian Parliament, the second session of the 39th Parliament of Victoria, on the 25th of February 1954. During that same visit, of course, Her Majesty dedicated the new Second World War forecourt and the World War II memorial and lit the eternal flame at our Shrine of Remembrance. As well as opening the Royal Children's Hospital building in 2011, the Queen had also opened its previous home in 1963, graciously noting it as a monument to Victoria's humanity and public spirit. And in a charming moment in 2006, when Her Majesty was here to open the 18th Commonwealth Games, the Queen's baton, which had travelled 180,000 kilometres around 71 nations of the Commonwealth, from Buckingham Palace to Melbourne, was presented to Her Majesty by one of our most renowned former Olympians, the Honourable John Landy, who happened to be the 26th Governor of Victoria at the time. The Queen and His Royal Highness Prince Philip's visit in 1954 represented the first by a reigning monarch. There was much anticipation. On the afternoon of the 24th of February, an estimated 1 million Victorians lined the streets from Essendon Airport to the city to greet them. Many had camped out overnight to secure the most advantageous position. The royal couple stopped at Essendon Town Hall, Parliament House, and the Melbourne Town Hall to hear 3 speeches of welcome before they even arrived. The Age reported it as the greatest day in Melbourne's history, and that the vast crowds who attended sounded like the roaring of the sea. The Queen's legendary work ethic was apparent from that very first visit. Their Majesties traversed much of the state, and on one day alone they visited Benalla, Shepparton, Echuca, Bendigo, Rochester, Castlemaine and Maryborough. The public excitement was high wherever they travelled. Nearly 100,000 people lined the streets of Bendigo to catch a glimpse of Her Majesty, and in a fit of superlatives, the Bendigo Advertiser hailed the visit the proudest, supremest moment the city has known. As an aside, I note that the royal couple travelled aboard the Victorian Railways Royal Train. State Car Number 5, as it was known, first saw service during that royal tour, but was used by Victorian governors for their own country tours thereafter. No longer today. In talking of Victoria and Her Majesty in the same breath, it's impossible not to mention a shared love of sporting events. When Tony and I were fortunate enough to meet Her Majesty in 2015, sport was a natural and lively topic of conversation between us. Michelle Payne, just weeks earlier, had become the first female jockey to win the Melbourne Cup, and the Queen was absolutely well across that. Given Her Majesty's love of horse racing, it's no surprise that during her first visit here, she attended at Flemington. But there is one particular race, of course, originally the Queen's Plate, which was renamed in her honour during that 1954 visit. The Queen Elizabeth Stakes remains one of Australia's best weight-for-age races. It's been won by Australia's most illustrious gallopers, including Tulloch 3 times, Might and Power, and the incomparable Winx, who made it her own between 2017 and 2019. But racing was not the only sporting event to attract Her Majesty during her visits to Victoria. Amongst the many that she attended, the Queen, with His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh, and their Royal Highnesses Prince Charles and Princess Anne, were the first members of the royal family to attend a Victorian Football League game when they went to see Fitzroy play Richmond on the 5th of April 1970 at the MCG. It was, by the way, the first game played on a Sunday, especially arranged to fit in with the schedule of the royal tour. On that day, half-time was extended by 40 minutes so that the players could change their jumpers, wash their hands and comb their hair before being introduced to the royals. I've just seen a recent article that says it was also to enable them to put their teeth in, but I'm not sure about that. Former player and coach John Northey tells a lovely story that Richmond President Ray Dunn, apparently overawed by the occasion, became a bit tongue-tied when introducing the players. Northey said that when he got to me, he forgot my name. He said, "Your Majesty, this is," and Billy Brown was standing beside me, and little Billy said, "He's John Northey, I'm Billy Brown, how are we today?" Well, times change, and Her Majesty knew and read that fact well. And I think it will be brought home to us quite poignantly as we reflect on the pageantry and the celebration of the coronation on the 2nd of June 1953 and that of her funeral service next week. On the night of the coronation, some 650,000 of Melbourne's population of 1.4 million filled our city. The Argus headline the next morning colourfully described Bourke Street as like a giant sardine tin. A headline a little deeper in that paper in fact caught my eye. It read "Do-si-do for Sedalis," with the accompanying article describing that Melbourne's celebrating thousands roared and stomped their approval as the Governor, Sir Dallas Brooks, and Lady Brooks joined in square dancing in the streets. What's more, according to the report, Sir Dallas, our 19th Governor, not only danced in the street, he did so bareheaded. Obviously quite a notable sign of complete joy and celebration. Throughout Victoria, in the days surrounding the coronation itself, there were public ceremonies, church services, exhibitions, pageants, balls and gatherings, a Trooping the Colour at Princes Park, and of course a reception here at Government House. The Governor, no doubt with his hat firmly back on, made a radio broadcast especially for the school children of our state. And younger children, younger Victorians were certainly involved in all the celebrations. To recognise the occasion, Coronation Medals were awarded as a personal souvenir by Her Majesty to 2,300 Victorians who'd made a significant contribution to the community. Amongst those recognised were the Governor and Lady Brooks and John Cain Sr., the Premier of the day. One of those medals is in our display of memorabilia for the public to visit here at Government House over the coming days. Victorians are likely to mark the Queen's passing in a way different to how they gathered in 1953, not only because of the sombre nature of the occasion, but because with the passing of time, we are different. So too is the world. Our community is notably more diverse than it was. We have the technology that enables us now to gather in smaller groups to witness important occasions, and we're more used to the momentous moments of history being played out in our lounge rooms. But we will still be brought together by a shared respect for and appreciation of the Queen's unparalleled life of service. In these last few days, much has been written about Her Majesty's life and the number of duties, events, places, and people that were part of it. The numbers are astounding. She met regularly with her many prime ministers and with countless heads of state and ambassadors. She signed nearly 3,000 bills into law. She visited some 117 countries, and it's probably impossible to calculate just how many people she met in Great Britain, in the Commonwealth, in her realms and in her territories, and around the world. We can't estimate how many people were touched when she received their floral bouquets, shook their hands, or waved to them from a moving car or a plane or a ship. But the numbers will never tell the most important part of the story, the part about Her Majesty's impact, quite simply, how she made people feel. How a boy in hospital was touched because he had nearly met her, that a little girl felt that she was kind, that a student was overcome with emotion just by knowing that his father and grandfather were given the honour to protect her. Or all those she visited in times of crises, those she mourned beside, those she congratulated or thanked or honoured, those who received messages of support when needed, it has happened many times here in Victoria, and all of us who enjoyed her wit and her humour, whether playing alongside 007 or Paddington Bear, and how she touched all of us who observed her strength and her grace at times of the utmost personal and public challenge or tragedy. Most of us, of course, can't remember a time when Queen Elizabeth II was not the monarch. She's been a constant in our lives for such a very long time. Despite global challenges, despite the changing face of us as Victorians, and despite our appetite for honest and reasoned discourse on our past, our present and our future, there's widespread appreciation of Her Majesty's sense of duty and her devotion to a lifetime of service. Every one of us gathered here, although many were not yet born at the time, can recite the words of the 21-year-old princess who pledged to devote her whole life, whether it be short or long, to our service. It was a promise made and a promise magnificently kept, with the Queen fulfilling her duty right up to the end of what was, thankfully, a long life. The proclamation that you've witnessed this morning talks to a seamless change that promotes continuity. As we mourn the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, we offer our condolences to His Majesty King Charles III, as well as our support for his own pledge of duty. When His Majesty's mother ascended the throne, we welcomed a queen, a young woman whose grooming for the role had been unexpectedly cut short with the untimely death of her father. With the ascension of King Charles III, we welcome a man who, for many decades, has walked beside an exemplary sovereign and has been living his own life of service. We also welcome a king who spent part of his formative time here in Victoria, a monarch who forged his own special connection with us when in 1966 he attended the Timbertop campus of Geelong Grammar School. It's a connection promoted by his visits since then and the messages of support that he's given, including recently when we faced the challenges of a global pandemic. It's a connection kept through the personal relationships maintained by His Majesty here, friendships with former classmates and teachers, relationships with those he has met or worked with over the years, including with our former Official Secretary, Joshua Pulse, who served their Royal Highnesses, the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall, as they were then, as Assistant Private Secretary from 2012 to 2014. The King has pledged himself to duty for the remainder of his life, following the inspiring example set by the Queen in upholding constitutional government and seeking the peace, harmony and prosperity of his peoples. I have no doubt that amidst the weight of these new responsibilities, His Majesty King Charles III will indeed, To borrow his own words, draw strength from the light of the example set by Queen Elizabeth II. As we wish him well, may we also individually and collectively, as citizens and as leaders, draw strength and inspiration from the light of her example. God save the King.
Thank you, Your Excellency. If you are able to do so, would you please stand and join in the singing of the Royal Anthem of Australia, followed by the Australian National Anthem, and remain standing for the departure of Her Excellency, Mr. Howard, and the Premier.
That concludes official proceedings for today. On behalf of the Governor and Mr. Howard, we invite you to stay and to enjoy the hospitality of Government House. We would encourage you to please make use of the space offered by the State Apartments in our effort to support a COVID-safe environment. Please enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.